Have a incredible guest with me today, Brian Kilmeade. Many of you may know him as one of the most trusted voices on Fox News, and he's agreed to come on. We're going to be discussing the state of the country as well as a new book that he has coming out, or that is out, rather. Brian, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Steve, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
My background with you is I enjoy watching your show and listening to your podcast as you cover important topics around the country. But my first interaction with you was actually back in your days of hosting and being one of the commentators for the Ultimate Fighting Champion. Those were some great days, and my son, who's a big UFC fan, is just going to be over the moon that I was able to speak with you because he went back and watched all of those. So you have a new book out called Teddy and Booker T: How Two American Icons Blazed a Path for Racial Equality. I want to jump into that because right now in the United States, it feels like we're getting mixed messages about whether we are racist or whether we are accepting. I truly believe that the United States is a unique place. However, if I go to the Dominican Republic, I mostly encounter Dominicans. If I go to Sweden, I mostly encounter Swedes. But in America, we have the privilege and the opportunity of rubbing shoulders with every race and every color. Do you think America is a racist nation, as some say, or are we mostly racially tolerant, as others believe?
The most successful multicultural country in the history of the world. Doesn't mean it's perfect. Doesn't mean that American Indians who might choose to live in their own neighborhood. It doesn't mean they don't like Italians. That's different. I think that you were looking at a country that was born when slavery was on every continent on the planet, and they took a civil war to get rid of it. And when it was all said and done, if you look back, it's something they never taught us in schools. I just learned over the last 10 years about the 1876 compromise when they couldn't, there was so many problems in 5 to 7 states between Samuel Tilden and James Garfield. They said, okay, we can't have another constitutional catastrophe. We're only 10 years out of the Civil War. How do we make a deal here? And they said, okay, we'll give you Garfield. Republicans get Garfield, but you pull your Union troops out of the South. And then Garfield says, I'll only agree to it if you promise to leave everything in place. No more of these, separate but equal. Make sure everyone can vote. Make sure everyone's got their rights restored. And these states said, yeah, no problem, but they didn't tell the truth. Next thing you know, we got poll taxes, a massive lynchings. We have separation in schools and threaten people not to run for office because they're black. And interracial marriage or relationships was frowned upon. And that's the world that Booker T. Washington was in, and that's the world that Teddy Roosevelt's mom grew up in. She married a Northerner, Rich Roosevelt, and they have Teddy. But Teddy heard all the Southern stories, and Teddy was a kid that was so sickly they didn't think he'd survive. He had bad asthma, bad eyesight. They thought he was going blind. So even though he had money, this kid had to be homeschooled because he was always at any moment he could literally die because they didn't have any asthma treatments back then. They actually at one point blew cigar smoke in his face. They thought that would open up his lungs. How insane is that? Yeah. So Booker T. Washington was born a slave, and that captured me. I go, I got to read this, and I'm amazed. So I read up from slavery, and then I start reading everything about him, and then reading other writings, and Teddy Roosevelt's all over it. And that's when I thought, okay, maybe there's something here. I can't do the best Roosevelt biography. I can't do the best Booker T biography, but maybe I could talk about how their lives crossed, but most importantly, how our country was made better. So this is about two unlikely trailblazers who had this unlikely mutual respect and were willing to book the mores of the times because they care more about the country. And in Booker T. Washington, his race. We got to get African Americans into the mainstream. We got to prove to those people who believe there's a innate difference between races that they're wrong, and not hate them. Do not hate anybody. It's only going to hurt you. So he little by little and the journey is what this book is about. But by finding his way from a kid that couldn't read to getting his freedom at 9, and then going to West Virginia to work in the salt mines, to finding a way to get an education. So great, smart was he? He got himself into Hampton College, And then he went from a nighttime student, a daytime janitor, to the best student, to one of the best teachers, and to having a white mentor named General Armstrong. When he got a letter saying we can open up an historical black college in Alabama, but we only have 2 weeks to do it. Who could do it? He recommended a 24-year-old black guy. And they go, no, give me a white guy. He goes, no, it's this guy. You trust me. This is the guy. And he showed up and it was a shed. And within 10 years, it was 1,500 students, more students there than at Harvard. And they learned a skill. This is, I don't know if you're handy, Stephen. Are you handy?
I'm not.
I'm not either. These guys, you could not graduate unless you learned a trade. That's why Mike Rose on the back of the cover. 3 years ago, I said, Mike, this is everything you're talking about. Learn a trade. You'll never be out of work. You have pride in your work. There's not a lot of glory like acting or being, we're doing broadcasting, but there's such satisfaction in it. So they learned to read and write. They also learned civics, how to hold yourself, how to look people in the eye. And they also learned a trade, and they got this elite skill. Everybody wanted to hire a Tuskegee student because of Booker T. Washington and what he did. And then he went up north and he went in to introduce himself to Andrew Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, Roosevelt, who found Sears. And little by little, he impresses all of them. And they go, how can we help? He goes, check out Tuskegee. And they said, oh, my goodness, you're changing the country. Let me donate. And then that would have allowed him to get more students, more teachers, get more of an international reputation. And then Teddy Roosevelt says, how can I help? I read up from slavery. And he goes, well, let's meet. They meet. And he goes, if I ever become president, you're going to be my advisor. McKinley's shot months later. He becomes president. And Booker T. Washington, a kid born a slave, is an advisor to the president of the United States. So my hope is it'll inspire people to say, why not me?
Yeah. You mentioned in your book that he was a general, but, he also became president. General Ulysses S. Grant, he said it wasn't until the 15th Amendment, when every race, color, creed was allowed to vote, that the United States was really coming into her own and moving in that better direction. How important do you think that was as a pivotal mile marker in America's journey?
It's equality. Your vote matters as much as my vote, as much as Booker's vote. So if I want to get elected in Alabama as a state office, national office, if I want to win that electoral college, I got to go down and say, hey, white community, what do you need? Hey, black community, what are your interests? How do I make your life better? You know why? Even if it doesn't matter my beliefs. If I want to win, I better win you over. And that vote, one person, one vote, everyone votes, got everyone's attention. It also, for a brief period of time, made a lot of African Americans run for office. And then they were part of the process. And I just think that people need to know this story. I don't whitewash anything. When people take statues down and they say, well, you don't want to take statues down because, you believe America was perfect. No, I know he had slavery. I know he had Jim Crow. I also know the great journey we made. I also know I'm comparing us to other nations. Nobody does what we do. No one's able to accomplish what we accomplish. No one's ever melded some other more cultures. The key is wanting to be an American while appreciating your heritage. And that's what I try to outline. You're Italian, great, but you're here now. So embrace your Italian heritage. But don't you want to be an American? The answer's always been, of course. Now people come in here and in a lot of cases, they don't love the country. A lot of people born here don't love the country. These guys love their country. And if you're Booker T. Washington, a lot of reasons not to.
Yeah, yeah. As I read through your book, I wanted you to clarify two things. Number one, were Booker T. Washington and Teddy Roosevelt, were they friends before he became president? And then second, as he becomes president, my understanding is he calls Booker T. Washington to dinner at this pivotal dinner at the White House, where he asks him, please help me understand your race. How can we help you guys, live the American dream?
A couple of things. Yeah, they did. And it was Edith and Teddy picked up from slavery when he was vice president. And they said, I got to meet this guy. This is it. This is the most inspiring story ever. And they met. And I think it was April of 1901, I'm pretty sure. And they met for the first time. And they just said, They just hit it off. And next thing you know, he said, I want to come visit Tuskegee. He goes, absolutely. So they all have it set up, and McKinley gets shot and eventually dies. And we have the letter in the book that Teddy Roosevelt goes, I regret to say I got to postpone my trip. I'm now president, and I got a lot to do. So when you come up, make sure you come by. And the thing about the dinner, you're right to point it out. It was the thing everyone points to. But they don't really point to anything significant that was talked about. It was two friends meeting with family, talking about, shooting the breeze. And then after they were done eating, they went and talked until 11 o'clock at night. And then Booker went home and went back to Tuskegee. But someone checked the guest book and said, man, you had a black man eating with your family, even though it's Booker T. Washington, everybody knows him. That's an outrage. Everyone should be outraged. And there's people that would just say the most horrific things possible. And all these newspapers, the headlines, I don't even want to repeat them. I can't. But back then, it was just abhorrent. People thought he just overstepped. Teddy Roosevelt, you're going to pay the price. And Booker T. Washington's going to pay the price. And Booker was more worried than Teddy, because Booker's worried about them taking out on his institution. He's worried about them taking out on his students. He's worried about arson, burning the place down for some racist that didn't want black men and white people conspiring to make the country better. So he always had to worry about something else besides himself. Whether it was his family, but most of all, what he built there. And what he built is basically a factory of great education, just forming great people. And I was on the campus. You could eat off the floor. It is immaculate. And the professors and their pride and the statues and tributes to Booker, and they have the first buildings that are up there. And this guy actually bought kilns to make his own bricks because they were making so many buildings. He goes, why are we wasting all this money on bricks? Why don't we make our own? Well, he finally ran out of money after the three didn't work. The fourth one, he went and hocked his watch and bought a kiln, and it worked. And they end up having the best bricks around. They was able to sell them and give them to the rest of the town. And those buildings are still standing today. So that's his legacy. A lot of people point to W.E.B. Du Bois, who was more like Al Sharpton, Malcolm X, disappointed the country, can't handle inequity, never looked the other way. Booker T. Washington says, okay, you guys are racist. You guys are racist. I'm not mad at you. That's where you were brought up. I'll change your mind by you watching what I do. W.E.B. Du Bois is somebody who said, it's so wrong. How could you tolerate their feelings that this guy's a racist and this family's a racist? How is that okay? He goes, no, I'm living here. I can't fight every fight. I'll change their perception by making every student that graduates a postcard for success. And gradually, generations will see there's no difference. So there was a story. This was a major scandal. John McCain referred to it when he lost to Barack Obama. He came out and he said, decades ago, Booker T. Washington came to dinner with Teddy Roosevelt. It was a national scandal. Now, all these years later, it's an African-American who's going to be the host at the White House. And those days are far gone. Shows you how far we've come. That made me curious, who is this Booker T. Washington guy? But there was this story that Booker T. Washington told, and I thought it was in Up From Slavery, and I finally got it in Larger Education, so I'll share it. He's standing waiting for a train, and a guy walks up to him and goes, you're Booker T. Washington. He's a white guy. And he goes, you're one of our finest Americans. He goes, well, thank you very much, but our finest Americans, President Roosevelt. And the guy said, yeah, I used to think that until he had you over for dinner. Now think about that. He wasn't trying to make a joke.
Yeah.
That's the mindset.
Wow.
And he said, wow. And he wrote it twice. He told Teddy Roosevelt that. But he said, that's when I decided to let sleeping dogs lie. I can't win him over. There's nothing I can do to win him over. He does not know he just insulted me. But it's okay. That's how he was brought up. And Booker T. Washington's like, okay, marching on. I'm going to share this story because it shows the thinking that I have to overcome.
Yeah. Wow. I think, your generation, my generation, I have a hard time wrapping my mind around it just because I interact with so many people and cultures and races so evenly and openly. But I have to imagine with, what we see in the news and some of it, I think is just, to stir the pot, but there has to be lessons that even today, younger generations can learn about respecting each other, being curious about each other. What are maybe some of the lessons from their friendship that you think could be applied to today?
The thing that's under people say, well, what was the big link? Well, there was direct things that Booker T. Washington did, recommended judges, postmasters, gave them an idea what the issues that matter most in the South. He was able to pressure lawmakers to push certain things. But the best thing I believe when I stopped researching and started writing was that the example, when you see Teddy Roosevelt, the president, who gives so much credit to Booker T. Washington, they're both dressed to the nines. They look like total pros. You see these great speakers side by side. Teddy goes, I'd love to be on Tuskegee's board. He goes, absolutely. Love to be your advisor. He goes, fantastic. Think about the example of the little black kid, the 6-year-old black kid growing up in 1910. And when people were telling him he could only do so much in society, go, really? Why can't I be like Mr. Washington? And when people say, well, blacks and whites should be separate and they should not be going to the same bathrooms, and if there were water fountains back then, I don't know, but we saw all those signs. Well, really? Why is the president okay with black people? Why can't I be okay with that? I don't care what my parents think. Or make my parents answer that question why it's not okay. So I think so many minds would change when they saw the respect they were given. And when Andrew Carnegie, the richest man in the world, comes down, he goes, anything this guy needs, I will do. And what did he do? He did by example. And however he was brought up, whatever his father said to him, that's by the wayside because of Booker T and then the way he interacted in all walks of life. The 15-year-old kid with nothing and the 70-year-old Andrew Carnegie with everything. They both felt the same way about him, and he felt the same way about both. I think that's the greatest example.
Okay. Final question. I appreciate your time. I know how busy you are. As you studied these two men, you had to try to put yourself in their shoes at times, I'm sure. If you were to try to see the world today through Booker T. Washington's eyes and President Roosevelt's eyes, what do you think each of them would be proud of about the United States?
Look, despite Kaepernick taking a knee and the George Floyd riots that happened, I think you see tremendous progress. President of the United States, there's black 3 secretaries of states. I think that we want perfection, but we have been a melting pot. We got to just reattach ourselves to history, our own history, and then we'd understand how special we are. You just can't keep telling someone they're exceptional, and then you show everything on the news that so it looks like we're coming apart. I think people have to understand and make their own decisions if they know where we came through. I think you'd be very pleased if we became a superpower, the number one economic power. I think they both would be stunned by the debt that we're carrying. I agree. And well, I think that they'd be a little surprised there's so much pushback and being the beacon of freedom in the world and so much isolationism that we're seeing even amongst Republicans today, more Republicans. So I think some of those things I think you would think, we weren't a superpower. We were emerging back then. So I think we must be doing something right if 6 million people are trying to sneak in, let alone the people that are actually filling out the application.
Yeah, that's a good point. I still think we are a beacon of hope. Otherwise, they wouldn't be squeezing through the fences and coming from every country they can. I appreciate you coming on. I'm excited to finish the book, and I'm just so grateful for your time. If people want to get a copy of the book and follow you, what's the best way to do that, Brian?
Well, you go to briankilmeade.com. I got the listings every there. There's others sometimes you got to click just to register. Others I do a show and I talk about all the books together and basically what made America great. And I do it on stage. So I'll be in Michigan. I'll be in Illinois. I'm going to be in New Jersey. I got about 6 or 7 of those shows out there. So it's VIP opportunity. If anyone wants to personalize, it goes to my local Barnes & Noble. I show up once every 2 days, sign them. We send them out for the holidays. So just if you go to my website, it'll bring you right to there.
Okay.
So thanks again. Thanks again, Stephen.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure to put that link down below to the book, also to briankilmeade.com. And I appreciate you coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day.